Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Here is Bruce Newman from Bruce Newman's Academy, director of the Next Level of Yourself project. Tonight, we're gonna talk about Clint Eastwood, the legend of the cinema, the author, visionary. Obviously, Mr. Clint Eastwood would most likely watch this video, and I have to say that whatever would be said tonight, Mr. Eastwood, we fully endorse all your work, all your art. We're gonna spend this evening with the man with a name who met Dirty Harry, the psychic of the billionaires, Mr. Maurice Amdur. Good evening.
Good evening. Hello. You know, it's interesting. The first thing to say about Clint Eastwood is you mentioned that he's a director and a producer, but one of the very special things about Clint Eastwood is that he owns Malpaso Productions. And Malpaso Productions has pretty much made every single film he's ever been in. And so he's not only a producer, he's an owner. He always owns a piece of what he's in. And what a production company is, they do a distribution deal with a studio and they work out of the studio. But when you're your own producer, you have a lot more power and authority in what you do. And he's always had an enormous amount of power, which leads to me to something very special about him. Clint Eastwood was born on the 31st of May, 1930, the year of the horse. And he was born under Life Force 4. Now, people who are born under Life Force 4 have an unbelievable amount of different abilities. They would treat the king the same way as they would treat the person that cleans the toilets. That's the first thing. They don't mind getting their hands dirty and they're never lazy. They're incredibly emotional and usually they have a lot of problems communicating with children and or parents. And also in their love life, they tend to get hurt quite a lot and there's usually a lot of misunderstandings. Clint was born under the sign of Gemini with his moon in Cancer. When you have the moon in Cancer, as well as being intuitive, extremely intuitive, you're also rather fixed. Being fixed and cardinal, which is what Cancer is not a particularly good thing because unfortunately you can be very, very stubborn. Of course, he's a genius in his work and one of the greatest cinematic heroes of all time. It might be interesting to note that John Wayne, who was also a Gemini, didn't like him and was in fact jealous of him. And he wasn't the only person jealous of Clint Eastwood. There's a rather interesting story about Rock Hudson and Clint Eastwood. Very early on, before Rawhide, Clint Eastwood was cast to play a lab technician in a Rock Hudson movie. I think possibly because Clint in those days was very tall. Originally, he would have been somewhere between 6'2" and 6'4". These days, he's more like 5'9". I think it's to do with being almost 95. But this is what happened. He was hired on the set and he was wearing the most beautiful pair of glasses. They were really stunning. And Rock Hudson said, I'm not filming with him wearing glasses like that. And because he was the star of the film and had a lot of clout in those days, this is long before anyone knew that he was gay. So that's not relevant really, except he would have been maybe sometimes gay people, just like all people, can be a little bit bitchy. And in this particular instance, Rox Hudson was. So Clint wasn't allowed to wear the glasses. But what's interesting about it is the person who watched it, because he wasn't wearing the glasses, cast him in Rawhide. And Rawhide, of course, is what started Clint Eastwood's entire career. During the process of filming Rawhide, that's when he was contacted by Sergio Leone to make all of the Man with No Name movies. I don't know if you remember those, but they were the beginning of his major career. They were filmed, I think, either in Malta or Italy. I'm not 100% sure, but that's where the real career took off. Rawhide was a success, but it wasn't the same as The Man with No Name. Of course, directly after that came the Dirty Harry movies and then everything else. It wasn't until much later on that the career as a director started. But you see, the thing about the number four, which Clint is, and also the genius brain of Gemini, for example, Donald Trump is a Gemini. In fact, all of the most magnificent presidents of the United States have been Gemini. Sorry, my dogs there were growling at one another. All of the most magnificent and successful presidents, including JFK, who unfortunately was killed. It's interesting because also Trump, of course, they've tried to assassinate him 3 times. But they're all Gemini. So the Gemini mind is really something very special. As well as being what I call the bullshitter of the zodiac, that's every Gemini alive, they also are actually a natural genius. The reason I call them the bullshitter is because they all tell stories as well as the truth. Now, with Clint, of course, he's told the most magnificent stories as a director. But as I said, he was born under Life Force 4 in 1930, which was the year of the horse. Interestingly, in 1930, Sean Connery was also born, and Robert Evans was also born. So it was a pretty good year. They're just the first two I can think of. There's quite a few more. It really was a vintage time to be born. Clint is actually one of the few that are still alive from 1930. Now, as I say, he was born under the sign of Gemini with the moon in Cancer as Life Force 4, which means he would have loved his parents, they would have loved him, but they would have been strawberries and he would have been a banana. Or if you prefer, he would have been strawberries and they would have been chocolate. In other words, there was a difference in the elements between them. So I don't believe his childhood would have been idyllic, even though there may have been quite a lot of love. Now, as his life has progressed to the greatness that it has, he has had a lot of emotional tests along the way. And you know, he has 6 or 7 children at this point. I've actually met 2 of them and done an in-depth sessions with Francesca Eastwood, who's August 7. This is because is it Francesca? Wait a minute. Is the mother the lady that he had the illegitimate daughter with? Hold on. I'm pretty sure she's Francesca. She's August 7. And the mother is the red-headed actress. And I can't think of her name, but I read for her too. It's gone out of my head. But anyway, so the emotional communications for a Life Force 4 are complicated with both family. That's parents, children, and lovers. And I believe that Clint has suffered with those energies. You know, he had a very, very long relationship with Sandra Locke. Before he was with her, he had another wife. And then after Sandra, he had a baby with a Mexican lady that I think he married. And then they split. And then his girlfriend last year passed away. So he certainly had a lot of suffering in his life. But of course, suffering leads to incredible levels of learning and empathy, which obviously he's used in his directing, his writing, and of course, his acting. So at the moment, this is a rather good year for Clint. 2024 is good. Unfortunately, 2025, I'm sorry to say, is not particularly good. I'm a little bit scared. He's already had the loss of this partner. And as we get past May of 2025, I get a little bit worried for Clint's mortality. I'm hoping he'll just have some kind of fall and recover, but there is a risk around him. He has had falls before, and his health has let him down a few times. But unfortunately, in 2025, within him, there is a deterioration. I'm so sorry to predict this, but I can't change what is. I have skills and abilities to see things, but sometimes I see things I absolutely hate. I remember back in a couple of years back, I think it was 2020. In fact, I'm sure it was 2020. I had a dream, and I spent the night with my father, who was already deceased, and Sean Connery, who was at that time, as far as I knew, alive. And I found myself back in our family house. And I remember saying to my father, "You look rather good for 85." And I said to Sean, "My God, you look good for 90." And then when I woke up, um, I phoned immediately to find out if Sean had passed away, because the dream was showing me that they were both together in heaven, not that they were so close for anything, just that he had passed. And of course he had. So it would have been on the 20th of, it was the year 2020. I can't remember the exact day, but whenever he died in 2020, that was when I had the dream. It's not the only dream I've had where I've seen death. I told my mother exactly when my father would pass. And unfortunately, I'm cursed with the ability to sometimes know when people are passing over. And occasionally they contact
And
from the
during
other
the
side.
70s, the role of James Bond was offered to Clint Eastwood.
Yes, it
And
was. And I can tell you what happened there. What happened was that around the time that Sean Connery no longer wanted to play 007, which was around 1967, they had made an awful lot of money. Part of the reason that Sean didn't want to do it was the fame had become impossible for him. He was very, very uncomfortable in daily life. His plan was to be known as Sean Connery, not as James Bond. And so he didn't like the restrictions of being James Bond. He wanted to be known as Sean Connery and for a body of work, not just for one character. And also at the time, he had no peace. He could not move. He was so famous. He was possibly more famous than the Beatles. He literally in Japan when they were filming Hong Kong, when they were filming You Only Live Twice, they literally climbed over the toilets. Fans climbed over the toilets while he was doing his business. And that for him was it. He just told Cubby, I can't do this anymore. And that was the end of that. Now, around that time, a chronic search came for who's going to be the new James Bond. Be quiet! Dogs, they're very annoying. There was a search for James Bond globally, and they literally were thinking every which way, who, what, and where can we get to equal the same kind of income and profit level without disturbing the audience? Now, Cubby and his partner Zaltzman, Harry, had always wanted a Brit to play the role. They wanted somebody British, but they realized
traditionally,
they
James Bond is not supposed to be American,
correct. Well, James
according
Bond
to
is
the
actually
production.
yes. James Bond is supposed to be. He's supposed to have a Swedish mother. He's supposed to have a Scottish father, and he's supposed to be a little over 6 foot. They've completely gone away from the original draft with Daniel Craig being Daniel's not very tall at all. I'm not knocking him at all. He's a genius of an actor, but he certainly doesn't look anything like the original idea that was commissioned day one. I mean, Sean Connery was around 6'3" and change, built like a brick outhouse, and a real life tough guy, as I believe Clint was. But Clint's not as big. He's as tall, but he never had that frame. On all the occasions that I've met Clint, and I did meet him while he was still young, because I'm quite old myself, and he was never what I would call a big, large man. He was a tall, slender man with a good physique, but he was never. Sean was a really well built, thick set Scotsman. I would have said Sean when he was playing Bond, even though they like to write that he weighed 160 pounds. I think it was more like 220. And I think that probably Clint in his prime would have been about 180 pounds. Anyway, so they were
Yet
looking everywhere.
Clint Eastwood did refuse this role.
I'm about to tell you why. I'm going to tell you what happened because I'm very aware of it. So what happened was Clint Eastwood, along with Burt Reynolds and about 50 other people, were approached. Clint's opinion was that he's American, very much Californian American, and he didn't feel he was correct for the role. Burt Reynolds, who was also at that time one of the biggest stars in the world for American box office, also turned it down. There were an awful lot of people who turned it down, but it's an interesting bit of trivia here to throw in that back in 1962, when they were casting 007 the first time round, one of their considerations was a fellow called Timothy Dalton, and another consideration was Roger Moore, who was signed up to play the Saint. They auditioned all over the world, and in the end, a rather interesting Australian fellow called George Lazenby, who was actually a Virgo, he's September the 5th, 1939, he bullshitted his way into the role. I mean, he really did. He got Sean Connery's suit from his tailor that he hadn't picked up. He bought a Rolex that matched. And so he wore the James Bond suit that Sean Connery had not picked up. He wore the exact Rolex that James Bond wore. He got Sean Connery's then hairdresser to cut his hair next to Cubby Broccoli in the same place and said to him, I want to be James Bond. And he got a meeting and they cast him. But Clint turned it down on the basis that he felt he was too Californian, too American. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I don't know how James Bond would work. The whole idea of James Bond is that he works for Her Majesty and His Majesty and the British government as a spy. The only thing that's kind of funny about that is the only spy that everybody knows in the entire world who drives £300,000 sports cars and beds everything that moves. How do you keep quiet when you do that? You know? But so Clint turned it down, and I think he had other plans because he'd already started the Man with No Name movies, the spaghetti westerns. And then, of course, he did the franchise character Dirty Harry. I believe he did that 5 times to great success. And then he did other movies like The Eiger Sanction, so many more. He even did one where he sings all the time, Paint Your Wagon. It's an interesting one for people to watch. You've got the handsome Clint Eastwood with Lee Marvin singing through the whole movie. And actually, he's awfully good. So, he wanted he wanted a diversified career. And I suppose he didn't want to try and fill the shoes that Sean Connery had filled. I think that most actors were scared to take on a role at the level that Sean Connery had performed in that role. I mean, George Lazenby, I think the reason he wasn't scared is because he wasn't scared of anything. He didn't have much to lose. But I think any major name that would have attached themselves to Bond back in 1967, because the film was released 69 on Her Majesty's Secret Service, I think anyone who would have attached themselves to that project would have had an enormous amount of fear. I mean, Richard Burton, the Welsh actor, was offered the role. He turned it down. Oliver Reed was offered the role. He turned it down. These are both British actors. And pretty much everybody turned them down. And, Timothy Dalton turned them down because he felt he was too young. He was only about 21 or 22 at the time. And so in the end, it went to George Lazenby. And what people make a mistake about is that George Lazenby was actually quite successful in the part and was offered a 7-movie contract deal. But his agent said he didn't want to do it before he'd even discussed it with him and thought that Flower Power was going to take over. And so he never ended up continuing. Had he have continued, we wouldn't have had the marvelous Roger Moore when we did, and we wouldn't have had the incredible return of Sean Connery in 1971. Sean Connery came back to play James Bond. He gave them the most ridiculous and outrageous terms, and United Artists turned around and said, no problem. He asked for $2 million for himself, which in 1970-71 was probably the equivalent today. Yeah, I think it's the equivalent today of 100 million. And would you like to know what he did with the money? He set up a Scottish foundation, didn't keep a penny of it for himself, did a 3-picture deal with the studio. They only ever ended up making 2 of the movies. One was called The Hill, and the other was called The Offence, which, by the way, is possibly Sean Connery's best acted movie that he ever made. It's absolutely insane how good it is, because it's horrific in the sense that he plays a paedophile police officer, and he's the guilty party, and he spends the whole movie not realizing that it's him. But if anyone gets a chance, the Sidney Lumet film, The Offence, is an exceptional piece of acting. But back to Clint Eastwood, he went on to have an enormous career. And I think the most exciting thing about Clint Eastwood is not just his work as an actor and producer, but let's not forget, as a director, he's demonstrated skills beyond imagination. I mean, there's nobody can even come close. I mean, he played John Huston in a film, who was a great director. And it's interesting because a friend of mine called Jeff Fahey, who's an actor, starred in that, White Hunter, Black Heart. And of course, he played John Huston, who was a great director. But he himself has, I think, surpassed anyone that he's played. He is an amazing and phenomenal human being who will, in fact, turn 95 on the 31st of May, 2025. I'm just a bit worried about him, that's all. And now we've also got Scott Eastwood, his son, who's the absolute image of him, considerably shorter than he was in his prime, but very handsome and a wonderful actor. And then a lot of the other children have decided to enter the profession as well.
Clint Eastwood
Now,
is the horse in Chinese astrology.
yes, he is. He is. And horses have very long lives. They're incredibly determined. And they tend to do very well. In the 1930 horse that we've been talking about, there are a number of major successes from that year. As I mentioned, Robert Evans, the guy who ran Paramount, was a close friend of mine. He was 1930 horse. Sean Connery was a 1930 horse. Of course, there are many, many more, but they're the first three I can think of. It's interesting that that Clint was able to do so many different things, but as a Life Force 4, he had the capacity to be a businessman, a producer, an actor, a director, a singer. There are other elements too, because he was also mayor of Carmel between 1986 and 1988, which at the time he was living in Carmel and wanted a little more control over what was happening there. That's an
Notoriously,
interesting
Clint
one.
Eastwood always
Yeah.
has been passionate by jazz.
Yes, he really is very, very special. And, you know, the body of work that he leaves, or that please God he continues to live, is quite incredible. He's making movies as we speak. He's never going to lay down. You know, this guy is very much a genius. Now, the first time I ever met him, I have a very close friend in America who funnily looks a bit like Clint Eastwood and was a television and movie star for a while, a fellow called Fred Dreyer, who starred in a TV series called Hunter. And I met Fred in the early 1980s. And on my first visit out to Los Angeles, we went to the premiere of a film, I believe it was called Hacksaw Ridge, I think. I might be wrong. It was either that or Firefox or one of them. We definitely, and that's where I first met Clint. And at that time, he was still quite young. Well, he would have been somewhere in his 50s. So he still had his height and he still had his really good build. And he was still a very, very impressive gentleman and very polite and quiet and refined. Because I lived in Hollywood for many, many years, I seemed to bump into Clint many, many times. I would have seen him at the Palm restaurant at least 15 times. I would have seen him at the Beverly Hills Hotel, Dan Tanner's, a number of times at Dan Tanner's. And then, of course, what people don't realize is when you actually live in the so-called Hollywood, which is also Brentwood, Westwood, Central City, and so on, movie stars like that live very much like you or I do. So the crazy thing about living in Los Angeles is that you, especially if you're in that industry, you literally go to the dry cleaner and that person's directly in front of you picking up their dry cleaning. People like Clint Eastwood, believe it or not, like to do things for themselves. They're not so uppity or stuck up or snobby. You know, they like to get things done. So he's not the only one, but I met pretty much everybody I'd ever want to meet, literally having a coffee or walking down the street. But as my career grew and people heard that I was this rather clever, or clever may be the wrong word, but gifted psychic person that was able to be accurate, the word spread around and I got passed around like past the parcel. But also, I read for a fellow called Sumner Redstone, who was actually running the film industry in the United States for a very long time. He owned a little company called Paramount Studios and another little company called CBS and another little company called Simon Schuster. And then he owned the channel MTV and he owned Blockbuster and quite a lot of other things. And it was while I was with him, which was really pretty much every day for many, many years. I used to go with him at least 4 times a week to Dan Tanner's, the Palm, the Beverly Hills Hotel, to the Polo Lounge. We'd have dinner often. And it was then that I was introduced to this caliber of person. Now, the other thing that's interesting about Clint is that, like you see him in the movies when he plays the man with no name, with one leg up against the wall, the other leg down, head bent, and sort of observing everything that's going on. That's how I see him in my mind because that's how he used to stand in Dan Tanner's. And it was only after a couple of minutes, and then when he came over to say hello to Sumner and then hello to me because of Sumner, I realized it was him. But the other interesting thing was when I first met him, he was an extremely tall man. And then for some reason, over the last 15 years, I think it must be his age, he's lost an awful lot of height. I'm not talking about an inch or two. I'm talking about 7 or 8 inches. And funnily, the same thing happened with James Garner, who played the Rockford Files. He went from 6'4" to 5'9". And I think Clint sits somewhere around 5'9" now because I'm just under 5'11". and I'm taller than him at this point. But he really was 6'3", 6'4", without lifts at one point. The one who wasn't as tall as that was John Wayne. John Wayne was around 6'1" and used to wear massive lifts. Now, John Wayne and Clint Eastwood did not get on. John Wayne was the 26th of May, and I think part of the reason they didn't get on was because John Wayne, being a massive star, but may have been a little bit jealous of Clint, because John was very much an actor and Clint is an everything. Do you get it? Director, producer. He's the guy like Stallone. He'll change the light fitting. You know, there's a parallel with greatness. Stallone, again.
We may advance the idea that John Wayne was extremely jealous of Clint Eastwood as far
I,
as.
I think so. And to give you an idea, this is why some people didn't like Sylvester Stallone. Sylvester Stallone is a writer, a producer, a director, and a movie star, as well as a businessman. And some people can't bear it when people have what I call mega talent. And, you know, Clint Eastwood is mega talent. John Wayne, of course, was a massive star, but I don't think we could put them in the same street from the point of view of their abilities as producer, director, actor, singer. I mean, Clint Eastwood actually sang as well in quite a few films, not just the one I mentioned. He also sang in Honky Tonk Man. He's got quite a nice singing voice. So, you know, I think that caused a complication. Now, of course, because he's got older and the industry's changed, people, you know, really have much less of a problem with all his different abilities. One of the things even I learned in Hollywood is they like to pigeonhole everyone. So, for example, with Clint, it would have been, well, he's a cowboy, right? So when he went and became an action star, that was a bit of a complication for them. You know, it's like when Lee Majors was cast as the Bionic Man for 5 years, he had to wait quite a few years before he could do the Fall Guy or anything else, because they'd typecast him and pigeonholed him, which is what Hollywood does all the time. So, but Clint broke through, as of course did Sean Connery, because if we go back there, Sean was Bond. He gave up Bond and became an international film star, doing every kind of movie you can think of, from love stories to drama to action, you see. And Clint's the same. I mean, you know, he did that fabulous movie with Meryl Streep, Madison County, where he plays, you know, her lover. It's a secret love affair. So he's also capable of doing everything. You know, and there are some lovely pictures online of Sean Connery and Clint Eastwood chatting with one another. But one of the things you will notice is how Sean Connery is double his bodily size, not double his height, but the stock of the man, the actual stance. I remember the very first time I met Sean Connery, I was quite taken aback by what a big man he was. And when I met Clint, he was tall, but slight. That's what I'm trying to say. It's probably not relevant. It was just a bit funny because, of course, I never knew what they were like until I met them. I met Sean first when I was 17. Didn't meet Clint till I was in my mid 20s.
Clint Eastwood is a horse. He seems to be a man in one piece or one chunk, very rational.
Well,
Yet,
he's a number four. So number fours are the builder of the universe. When you're born under number four, you're a jack of all trades and a master of none. What it means is that the number four, let me go through this again. When you're born under number four, whether you're a horse or a Gemini or a Leo pig or whatever you are, doesn't make any difference. Number fours are emotional, sensitive, family oriented, but their life lessons are to be opposed upon, disappointed by both parents, friends, lovers, and your own children. So this would lead to an incredible emotional learning curve that in Clint's case has continued on right up to 94 years of age. As I said, he just lost his girlfriend. She passed away. She's something like 30 plus years younger than him, and she's the one that died. It's quite something, isn't it?
I can figure out the idea. Before this podcast, I never knew that Clint Eastwood was a Gemini, and I can hardly represent him with some kind of double face. This
Well, Gemini doesn't mean double face. Gemini means that the soul is basically, in a way, split into two characters. Now, even Donald Trump, who's another Gemini, or Colin Farrell, who's also born on the 31st of the 5th and another great actor, Gemini seem to be two people. I've had a number of relationships with Gemini women, and what's interesting about them is on Monday they're one person, and on Tuesday they're another, and by Wednesday they've gone back to the other twin. I think as they age, they get more in control of it, but Geminis are more than one person. That's every single one of them alive. So, for example, as a father, Donald Trump is probably sweeter than sugar, just like Clint would try to be. But because they're Geminis, they are changeable. And there's two twins living in there. There's two different individuals living within the one frame. So, for example, Clint was with his wife. He then left her for Sandra Locke. He spent 25 years with Sandra Locke. And, you know, she always wanted to have a child. They never had a child. And then immediately he met the next lady, who I believe was, I think, a Mexican lady, very pretty, but I can't remember her name, and immediately had a baby with her. Makes you think, doesn't it? Very Geminian.
Could we say that one of the Clint Eastwood's twin would be the cowboy, and the other one would be the philosopher, or would...
Well, no, I would say they're all him. But there's something one mustn't confuse. When a person is an actor, and if they have the range and skill that a lot of these action stars aren't allowed to use, that's also important. Action stars aren't always allowed to use their capacity. You see, the studios want to make money, so they typecast people. Now, Clint Eastwood could pretty much play any role he wanted, and he has. But originally, they would have kept him within a narrow font. Do you understand? They would have kept him. He was in Rawhide, so he became the man with no name, right? But later on, he was able to play action heroes. But he's also played, as I say, he played John Huston. He also played love stories, you know, and now he directs incredibly emotional films that show a genius level of talent. But one of the complications of being a film star is, especially when there was the studio system, and let's not forget that Clint Eastwood is now coming up 95. So his career was very much in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Even though he's still going, that was the peak. And in those days, there was a lot of control and restriction upon what an actor was allowed to do. So, for example, if we go back to Sean Connery, another hero, when he would want to do something like play a lover or play an old man or do a role without a toupee on, the studios weren't very happy about it. For example, when he made his James Bond comeback in Never Say Never Again, he wanted to do it bald with a moustache, but they wouldn't allow him to do that. So they put on the toupee like they did in the earlier movies. With Clint, there are similarities in the sense that for a while, before he took over himself, he wouldn't have been allowed the pleasure of playing some of the roles that he would want to. However, because his career has been so long, he's been able to break past that barrier. But all Geminis are more than one person, but it doesn't mean that they're bad or good. They just have this capacity over and above the rest of us. They can't help it. Geminis can change throughout the day. They can also decide to leave relationships and break business deals on a whim because one twin is different than the other. In fact, there's a very good movie starring Sir Roger Moore called The Man Who Haunted Himself. And even though this has got nothing to do with being a Gemini, if you watch that movie, it's about a man who has a car accident and his soul splits in half. It's actually probably Roger Moore's best acting role. It's absolutely superb. He demonstrates quite incredible skills as these good and bad versions of his soul. And I believe that film would educate anyone of how a Gemini is on the inside. Because it's two people, it's not one. I myself, for example, am a Leo. And even though I have the moon in Aquarius, I'm very much a Leo and I think like an Aquarian. But there's not two versions of me. What you see is what you get. I believe you're a Sagittarius. and you would be the
Back to
same.
you, Maurice,
Yes.
if I may allow myself. One of the Clint Eastwood's movie was based on upon your his relationship with you as a psychic, and your character was interpreted by Matt Damon. I don't
Yes,
remember the name of the movie.
I wouldn't necessarily say he was interpreting on me. However, and I'm not saying I was in any way involved in that whatsoever, but I would say the movie Hereafter you're talking about is one of the most brilliant pieces of work. It actually, the character that Matt Damon plays and the whole film itself, had it have not been a French American production, where you see the American audience is actually quite limited in how far they're prepared to open their minds. And so it wasn't a major box office hit. Hereafter is one of the best films I've ever seen. And one of the things that Clint Eastwood does in that movie is shows exactly what a fake psychic is and exactly what a real one is. And the Matt Damon character really does exemplify my life. The character he's playing very much resembles what I've experienced as a psychic person, both career wise and emotionally, on all levels. It's a brilliant piece of work. But I'm not going to go as far as to say because he met me 20 times in his life that they decided to do that film. I've also met Matt Damon a couple of times, who's a Libra. I believe he's October the 8th. He's a very calm and small fellow who, what actually happened was the first time I ever met Matt Damon, my friend Dr. Thomas Marinaro, who's a very famous Hollywood chiropractor, decided he wanted to invest in some property. And he said, "Do you want to come with and look at a few of these apartments?" So we were going around with a realtor who took us to about 4 or 5 different apartments. And the other person they brought with to look at the apartments was Matt Damon. At the time, he was investing in property, and why not? And he was a very unassuming fellow. And at the time, I wasn't really a fan of his. However, having watched his body of work, I think he's absolutely brilliant. The other fellow that I want to talk about for a second is that while we're on this track. So I used to train at a gym called Pro Gym, which is on Brentwood and San Vicente. It's not quite the same as it was when I first went there about 35 years ago. It was owned by a guy called Joseph Dorsman, who was in partnership with Ryan O'Neal. And pretty much in those days, every major star in the world went to that gym. From 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 in the morning, I would be training with and get to know all and almost every single famous movie star and young movie stars as well that I could ever want to meet. It was quite shocking because I was a boy come out from England and I wasn't expecting to meet all of these people so simply and so quickly. Anyway, I remember that a boy came to work out who was ridiculously handsome, incredibly tall, and very pleasant. And it was Ben Affleck. And in that gym is where he met his future wife, the Aries girl, Jennifer. That's where
Gwyneth
he met her.
Paltrow. Oh,
No, no, not Gwyneth Paltrow. No,
Jennifer
Jennifer.
Lopez.
No, not yes, yeah. He didn't meet Jennifer Lopez. No, the other Jennifer, the one that he was married to and had 3 kids with, that he's now divorced from. She used to do a television show and then she played a few movies. She's very good. I just can't think of her full name. Jennifer. She's the 17th of April. I know that. But I can't think of her surname. She's very good.
Whatsoever.
No, but there's a reason for this because in that gym, I started to get passed around like past the parcel to all the major movie stars. And the person who trained hardest, and I remember being impressed by him every day, was Harrison Ford. He used to train like you wouldn't believe. And I'd say he was
He
probably the
used to be a
fittest man in.
carpenter originally.
Yes, Harrison Ford is July the 13th, 1942 Cancerian. He has a Jewish mother and a Catholic father. And he was a carpenter, still is. This is what people do. It's something he loves to do. He's not just a carpenter, he's a brilliant carpenter. In fact, what happened with him was he was dressed as a carpenter, even though he was also an actor at the time. And he was working for George, the producer and writer of Star Wars, and he walked in while he was doing George's wardrobes. George's May 14th, but I can't think of his second name. You know, the man who made all the Star Wars movies. He's very, very famous. Can you think of who I'm talking about, George? He's the most famous producer of the Star Wars movies. Anyway, he was doing the wardrobes for Harrison in his home. He was invited to do that, and he walked in with the carpenter's belt on and just a shirt and some kind of shorts or jeans.
Would
And
you
George
mean
took,
that the Han Solo outfit comes from that?
within reason, yes, but this is what happened. George saw him, loved the way he looked, and offered him the audition and then gave him the role. But what's George's second name? He's one of the most famous men in the world, and his name's gone out of my head. It's really annoying. It happens to me. Must be my age. George.
Lucas.
Thank you. Yes, George Lucas. That's it. It wouldn't come in my head. He's May 14th.
Let's go
As, by
back
the
to.
way, wait, this is quite interesting. Wait. Lucas is May 14th, and Mark Zuckerberg is May 14th. I want to share for people who are interested in psychic phenomena. Birthdays constantly repeat. When you see a great person's birthday, remember if you're born on the same day, that is your true maximized potential in this life.
Hmm.
It's interesting, isn't it? Sorry, please, I didn't mean to move on, but I wanted to share that with you.
We were talking about this passionating relationship that Clint Eastwood has with supernatural.
Well,
You,
he
you,
certainly understands the supernatural. And of course, with the moon in Cancer, that gives him extra and superior intuition. A lot of people with the moon in Cancer battle with their capacity, which gives them what I'm going to call the equivalent of feminine intuition. I don't know if you've ever heard of feminine intuition.
I have a moon in Cancer, in matter of fact, by myself.
I didn't know that. Then you would have that capacity yourself. When you have the moon in Cancer, as well as being incredibly stubborn, you're incredibly intuitive and would have the capacity to feel and know things. It might confuse and annoy you. Now, for example, I have a brother called Ian, and we're not on the best of terms, but there's a reason for this story. He does not work as a psychic. In fact, he's a multi millionaire property developer, as well as a very talented opera singer. But there's a reason I bring him up. He's Capricorn with the moon in Cancer. But here's a story from a couple of years ago, and it's not the first time this has happened. He has the moon in Cancer and actually is not particularly open to the spirit world or the psychic world. I'm not saying he's entirely closed, but it's not
Strangely
something.
enough,
Wait, I want to get the story. It's not that he's closed to it, but he's not really open to it fully. So in June of 2022, he came to see me for a coffee. And he said, look, I've had the most terrible dream last night, and I'm very disturbed by it, and I want to tell you about it. He said, I saw you picking up your dead dog and carrying it with its tongue falling out of the side of its mouth. Someone had murdered it by car. And I said to him, that's awful. He said, I know. I had to tell you because it's just horrible. But he said, I want to tell you because I want to break it. But he said, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a precognitive message. That's how I'm trying to explain it, because sometimes we all have these foresights. Anyway, 2 months later, unfortunately, a rather crazy driver, while my dog was peeing by a tree, not in the road and not on the edge of the pavement, right up near the entrance to my property, literally 10 feet from the road, a mad driver, because there's a lot of them in London, went up the curb and ran her over. That leads me to a lot of other psychic stories that we won't cover today, but I will suffice to say that I will demonstrate, I have photographic proof that she visited me after she passed, my dog, on more than one occasion. I've already put it online, and she has manifested in front of me and in a plasma way, and I actually have photographs of it. I was very shocked because I'm not some kind of wacko nut job. I have seen dead people. I do occasionally speak to them, but I didn't know my dog would visit me after her passing. And even there's more, because when I went to her gravesite, I had her buried because I loved her very much. People knew that I was with her for 7 years. She never left my side. We did everything together, a bit like Mickey Rourke with his dog, because I know Mickey quite well. He's another amazing actor, but quite disturbed in some ways, but he had a most amazing dog, and he actually turned down every role that wouldn't allow him to use his dog. So if you ever watch Mickey's last, say, 20 movies, you'll see he's always cuddling his dog in them. Every single movie, he's got his dog in his arms. Always the dog is with him. He never puts it down. But anyway, when she passed and she was buried and had her full funeral, her grave is very beautiful. And it's in a place called Willow Cemetery. And one day I went there, bawling my eyes out, telling my dog how much I couldn't stand being without her. And I really was very disturbed. I hadn't shaved. I felt ill. I'd lost weight. I was pining for this angelic being that was called Bonnie, my little black pug. Anyway, while I'm doing all of this and crying my eyes out and talking to her in the spirit world in front of her grave, very disturbed, my mobile phone rang. And a lady said, "Are you Maurice?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Are you the chap whose number I saw online? Because I saw you on Facebook that you're very disturbed about the loss of your female pug." And I said, "Yes, that's me." I said, "Funnily, I'm standing here at Willow Cemetery, bawling my eyes out, telling her how lonely I am. Now, don't get me wrong, I had a girlfriend and everything, and I even had another dog called Sharky, but I just couldn't handle this loss." So she said to me, "Well, I got a pug when she was 6 weeks old, and she's now 3.5 months, and I'd like to offer you her because she needs to be rehomed. I don't have the time or the experience to bring her up. So would you like her?" And I said, "Well, tell me about her." I said, "What's her name?" She had her name's Willow. Well, I was standing at Willow Cemetery, crying my eyes out, telling Bonnie that I couldn't take it anymore. So I said, "You know what? I'm coming to pick her up." She says, "Well, I'm in Manchester." I said, "I don't care." I got in my car, drove 4 hours, walked into the apartment, found Willow in the cage where she'd been kept for a few weeks because they really had no idea of how you treat a dog. I took her out of the cage, bathed her. She's now jumped up on me right now. I'm going to show you. This is Willow. There she is. Now you go back down.
Oh, this is a French stuff, is it?
She's a. Well, I'll bring her back up one more time. She's a French. She's actually a pug. She's a chocolate dog. Can you see her? Stop barking and stop being so bloody miserable. What's all that boo about? I'm going to put her down because she's not in the mood. But anyway,
Adorable.
here's what happened. She
Would
is
you have
adorable.
some last word to say concerning
Yeah, but I want to finish that story. So
yeah.
what happened was I bathed her, which she was very well behaved, and they told me that she wasn't disciplinable. They didn't know how to manage her. Well, with me, she did everything I asked her to do. I took her for like a 10-minute walk when she was washed and dried. I blow dried her. And on the lead, she behaved exactly like you would want your dog to behave. And I took her for a walk, and then I put her in my car, and she put her arm on my arm on the rest, the car rest here for the whole journey home. We got home. I introduced her to Sharky. They instantly were in love. She's a girl, he's a boy, but they were immediately attached to one another. And I put her in my bed, and she slept on my shoulder, and she has ever since. And now it's not just that she reminds me of Bonnie. Of course, she's a completely separate soul, but definitely she's becoming like Bonnie in a way. And as I say, Bonnie has appeared, and I will prove this on another podcast because I don't know how clearly the pictures. I will send you the pictures of her manifesting. And
Before
anyone
going
who's
to any conclusion, I would have a question for you,
go ahead.
Maurice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we can train our skill in order to foresee the future? Is
I
it a
can definitely.
gift or could it be?
Okay, I've been seeing the future since I was 4 years old. I have never known why. It started I was at school at 4.5. Because I'm born in August, they put me in the year in front of me. So I was definitely smaller and less evolved than the other kids on one level. But I remember talking to a boy called Philip Ring in the orchard behind the playground. We were both 4.5 or 5, and we were talking about spiritual matters. And I was telling him about this, that, and the other. And I realized now we were also talking to other spirit children. At the time, I didn't realize it, but we were still connected. And that's when my psychic skills came in. I also had another experience, which was most peculiar, around that time. I was originally born into a Jewish family. Now, I've got nothing against Jewish people or the Jewish religion, but around the age of 4, and around the time that I met Philip Ring, Jesus visited me and kissed me on the forehead. And even at 4, I said, "Excuse me, why are you here? I'm in a Jewish family." And basically, he turned around and said, "Well, I was a Jew too. So what's that got to do with anything?" And then kissed me on the forehead, smiled. By the way, he did not appear with blonde hair and blue eyes. He appeared to me about 5'7", 5'8". I'll never forget it till I die.
Already, Jesus just had some short hairs,
Well,
isn't
I
it?
was going to say, it wasn't that it was so short, but I want to explain how he appeared. He was a stocky, well built, 5'7", 5'8" tall, Jewish looking fellow, or if you prefer, Arabic, Jewish, Palestinian, sort of Middle Eastern fellow. I'm 4
Big
years old, but I
jaws and
remember it.
big nose, isn't it?
Yes, that's what I wanted to say. What I had was a sort of a honey brown eyes. Let's start there. He had gorgeous and soulful honey brown eyes. He had, I wouldn't say his hair was short, but it certainly wasn't down his back or anything, but it wasn't that short. It was groomed, but curly-ish, brushed back, and it would have been to sort of here. And beautiful features, and his eyes were gorgeous, but they were not blue. He was not blonde. Not much. Maybe what I was
Would you
picking
say
up
that
was
the
my
Sansuer is a realistic picture of him, or is it a fake?
which one?
The Sansuer.
Oh, it.
Oh, let me see
Say it
how you.
again. Say it again.
Oh, let me check Google because maybe
Do you mean the Shroud of Turin?
absolutely yes.
That's 100% not Jesus.
Oh,
That's been
really?
proven 100 times. Yeah, that's not Jesus. Jesus was an Israelite Jew, born into an extremely religious Jewish family. And even I at 4 didn't know that. He said to me, "Why are you worried about being a Jew?" Because I didn't like the Jewish faith particularly. It had too many rules for me, even at 4. But anyway, he kissed me on the forehead, and from that day, I've been psychic. He also visited me again when I was 18, and I am linked with him. I am nothing in his league or bracket. I don't profess
My
to have any of
goodness,
his.
you have such a very deep connection with Jesus Christ.
I believe very
I d-
strongly that
I didn't
Jesus
know that
was and is.
it was going so far.
Well, I believe that Jesus was and is and always will be exactly what he was, the human manifestation of God. There's no question about it. Not for me. I mean, I don't mean to
We
insult or
agree
upset
about that
anybody. Well,
100%.
yeah, but I don't want to upset anybody with their religions. For me personally, I have had at least 10 experiences where he has proved himself to me. He's appeared to me a few times, but when I've been very desperate, I've opened my link to him, whatever that link is, and he has performed and delivered. Even with my father who passed, I said to him, either heal him if you can or take him, but stop this situation. And that day, my father passed away, but he was 85. He had a good life. And my father, God bless his soul,
I'm
did
going to be
abuse
here
his
slightly
body.
controversial, but as
Yeah.
far as is not the main topic of our podcast, and we are
Yes.
reaching the end of the podcast, it would be
Okay.
discreet.
Mhm.
Would you say that Jesus, Joshua ben Zarat, the
Yes.
original
Joshua
Jew,
Ben, correct. Born on the 11th of September, the 25th of
would you say
January,
that he did
of December. Sorry.
effectively have a sexual life?
Now, that's an interesting question because I believe because he was born as a human being and came into life in human form on purpose, let's put it this way. If I could be an alien and I was given the chance to travel and be an alien for a week or two, wouldn't I explore, as Roger Moore would say in the James Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me, when in Egypt, delve deeply into her treasures. You get it? If I'm Jesus, I'm not trying to be him, but if I'm born as a human, I would eat, I would go to the restroom, I would run, I would swim, I would play, and I would do everything that human beings do. Okay. He used to get foot massages. We know that. And we know that he loved females as much as he loved males. Now, whether he needed to experience sexual intercourse or sexual interaction, I wasn't there and I don't know, but I would say it's highly possible. Because remember, he was in human form, and the human form needs oxygen to breathe, food to live, love, feeling. You know, we have all our senses, and sexuality is one of the most incredible expressions of
I
our
wouldn't like
capacities. For example,
to dive
we
too
are.
much on this topic and be too much too controversial because we're gonna have some we may have
I
some
don't in any way
problems with.
wish to insult
Of
Jesus. I'm a big fan.
course.
All I will say is that he experienced a time as a human male. And remember, he did not establish the Catholic Church or the Christian Church or any church. He established being the Christ. So within that, all of the restrictions of the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, the Jewish religion, the Muslim religion, all religions, all of this control, he did not bring forward. Okay. So I don't know why, while he was here, he wouldn't have enjoyed whatever there was while being alive. The other problem, of course, is he would have felt pain. And of course, he died in an agonizing way, part of his own plan. And one wonders
So
if he felt the pain or not.
upon your opinion, Jesus Christ did die on the cross.
I believe he passed and resurrected. However, I do have some information from a friend of mine who wrote a rather substantial book about him. There is another theory that he did not die on the cross and that he went off and traveled the world, spent time in India, and had a family. But I actually am confused because the Jesus that has visited me would have died on the cross and would have resurrected. No, I've got to say I think he did, because I'm talking about the spiritual side of him that was gave me the energy. And remember as well that the calendar under which we live is from the date of his birth, and that's the only numerological character that's ever worked for me. I've tried lots of other calendars and they don't work. I tried the Muslim calendar, the Jewish calendar. I've tried about 7 or 8 different calendars. None of them work. The only calendar that works for numerology is his calendar, the Gregorian calendar, starting with,
I
the birth
know,
of
but
Christ.
I'm gonna look trivial, but I would like to stick to our narratives, which was about
Of
Clint
course,
Eastwood. May I
of course.
ask you, as far as you know, does Clint Eastwood believes in God and does he believe in Jesus?
As far as I know, he's either Catholic or Christian, and absolutely he has his own faith. I think most people, including him, have quite a strong faith in the fact that there's something else other than this life. Because even he and anyone would realize life is very fleeting. We don't stay here, my friend, not even him. It's been my experience to meet some of the most powerful people that ever lived and the most successful. And on meeting them, um, they don't stay. It's a fleeting visit. You know, even I now realize that our lives are terminate, a hell of a lot shorter than we thought they were. And yes, I'm quite sure he does believe in God. Yes, why not? I've never, in any conversation, I've never ever heard that he was an atheist, not by him or by anybody else. No, of course he
Maurice,
does.
you're
Even sure.
notoriously the psychic of the billionaires. If someone in this
Yes,
audience would like to attempt to have some consultation with you, would it be possible? Are you
I'm
approachable?
available, of course. I'm available. I think I'm now under bestpsychicintheworld.com. It used to be mauriceamdur.co.uk, but somebody's been reorganizing it for me. But obviously, they can go through you. I'm sure your channel has contact on
Of
it.
course, if you leave
I'd
some
rather, in a
comments,
way,
we
that
will
they,
redirect you
yeah,
to the
yes, that's fine.
Maurice website.
Of course, I'm available for readings. I've been doing this professionally for 45, oh, maybe it's a bit more now, actually. I started reading at 4 and started charging at 14. There's a whole story about that that I shall tell you on another occasion. But yes, of course, I'm available. I like to help people of all walks of life. I have read for dustmen, I have read for servicemen. I have read for multi-billionaires, the biggest pop stars in the world, royal families, the royal family as well, and of course the movie stars. I don't differentiate because I'm also a number four, which means I treat everyone the same. All number fours, as I said, they muck out the stables, but they also ride the stallion.
You personally knew Sean Connery, Roger
Yes,
Moore.
I did. Yes, yes. I all of these people I knew
Would you
well
agree?
over
And you
time.
know you know the art of Jan Fleming extremely well.
Yeah,
Would
Ian Fleming was interesting. He was a Gemini too. Ian Fleming shared his birthday with John Wayne. Ian Fleming was a Gemini, and I've had an awful lot of Gemini clients, including Sumner Redstone and oh, so many. There's another great producer, and his name's gone out of my head. I was reading for him for a long time.
De
His
Laurentiis?
name, no, bigger than him. John Peters. I used to read for John a lot. John's a 2nd of June Gemini. He was the guy who made Batman, not the latest one, but all the big ones. Massive producer. He was also married to Barbara. No, he was with Barbara Streisand, married to Christine Peters.
Would you
I
agree,
knew John
Maurice,
very
to
well.
be the guest of our show for a coming episode, what we could call
Absolutely, with pleasure.
James
And what
Bond
we
and the Alchemist?
Yes, and now that's interesting. You say the word The Alchemist. I actually wrote a script called The Alchemist, which I've been talking to one of the most famous actresses in Hollywood about doing, and she seems to be extremely interested. She's a very big star. I'm not going to name her, but I wrote a script about The Alchemist, and I will give a little bit of that away, not now. But yes, of course, and I do know quite a bit about Bond and the history of the films and all the different actors that have played it because of course Bond has had six or seven actually, if we include Barry. There was a American actor called Barry. I can't think of his second name. He did
Do you
a
feel that
James
we could
Bond.
explore the this formula of James Bond through the
Yes, it's the escapist.
numerology and
Of course.
alchemy, esotericism?
Well, interestingly, every single Bond film has perfect astrology. And each of the actors playing Bond at the time they played Bond were in an interesting numerological space. And I will demonstrate that when we do that show. We'll talk about where each actor was in their life, what their numerology was, what the astrology of each film was, and how they ended up being the success that they were. Yes, with pleasure. We can also talk about the music from the Bond films and who did those songs and where they were and how they put together those incredible soundtracks. And of course, the gun roll, the gun barrel at the beginning of the film. The only Bond film that didn't have that was Never Say Never Again.
They did refuse for some reasons.
No, they didn't
Lana
have the
Del Rey.
rights. No, they didn't have the rights at all. For Never Say Never Again was produced by Irving Kershner and Sean Connery himself, and they only had limited use. They didn't have the rights to the gun barrel. Just like for the last 20 years, Eon didn't have the rights until Spectre to use the title Spectre because Kevin McClory came up with the title of Spectre. And so they couldn't use it. Immediately they could when he died, his estate sold it to them and it reverted to them. They immediately started involving Blofeld again in the storyline. But we can go into all of that when we do the show.
Sounds so exciting. I'm quite
It could be interesting, yeah. I
intrigued.
have met all of the actors that played Bond, and I've been friendly with a few of them.
Including Daniel
Um,
Craig.
I have met Daniel Craig a couple of times. Yes, I don't know him well, but I've met him a couple of times. I think he's a genius actor. I don't. I'm not going to say I don't like him in the role because I think he's a brilliant, multi-talented, multifaceted, marvelous actor. But I would
Everyone
say,
says he's gay because he's in private wearing a pink suit, but
well, the thing
it's
is
wrong,
that,
isn't it?
well, I'll explain. I think many people have different types of sexuality, but let's not forget that Daniel Craig is married to one of the most beautiful women on earth. and he has had a child with her recently, and he also has a full-grown daughter. So if he is gay, he might be gay a little bit, but certainly not fully gay. He might be what they call bisexual.
I knew that it
But
was a rumor.
well, I can't see his sexuality. I mean, if you'd have said Pierce Brosnan, I'd have said absolutely no chance, fully heterosexual. If you'd have said Roger Moore, I would have said experimental. If you'd have said Sean Connery, there's more chance of him growing wings and flying to the moon than being gay. But when we
I
talk about,
couldn't believe that Sean Connery could be even 0.5%.
well, a lot of people would have said that about Rock Hudson, but Sean wasn't gay. But with Daniel, I think considering he's a happily married, faithful and loyal man who's had a lot of very beautiful girlfriends, the last time I saw Daniel, and as I say, I don't know him over well, but you'd be surprised, it was in the Waitrose on the Finchley Road about 2 days before the premiere of Spectre. And I was getting frozen peas, and so was he, and he was with his adopted son. And it's funny because nobody knew it was him. He was wearing a baseball cap, a pair of jeans, and a t-shirt. And I'm just a little bit taller than him and similar looking in a way. These days, of course, I'm much older and I'm heavy. But when I was slim, and I was then, when I did Maurice's Psychic World, in a couple of episodes, they photographed us together because we used to have a little bit of a similar look. I've got smaller ears though. But anyway, the point was that he's a rather nice fellow, and I think he's very kind. I think he's a good father. I think he's a good husband. I think he's a genius actor. I just think
What an incredible actor. Mm.
he is. He's a genius actor, but he definitely has a very different physicality and facial structure than Sean, George, Roger, Pierce. It's a very
He doesn't
different
look like
physical.
a regular James Bond.
No, but in fairness, he's done very well. And I know for a fact that Sean Connery absolutely loved his portrayal, as did Roger Moore. They loved him in the role. I mean, they absolutely thought he was amazing. It'll be interesting
He's
to see what
absolutely
they do next.
compelling.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do next because I think they'll go back to a Sean Connery type person and reboot it with a big, tall, dark, well-built man. I don't think it'll be Henry Cavill. I think he's done too many other roles. I think they'll pick somebody completely different. Actually, Daniel's the shortest man to ever play Bond. But then
Yeah.
all they do is cast different people around him. What they do is they'll cast shorter actresses and shorter opposing villains. When Roger was in the role, they used slightly taller actresses. When Sean was in it, all of the actresses were tall because he was such a huge physical man. In fact, if you watch You Only Live Twice or Never Say Never Again, watch it carefully, and you'll see that he's squatting in the fight scenes because he was as big as whoever it was he was fighting. So to make him look smaller, he kind of squats because he was, he was a very big man. I remember when I met him, I was shocked how big his hands were and how tall he was. But yes, but Daniel's a lovely man, but I'm not sure that he's gay because if he's gay, why has he got a beautiful young child? Why has he got a grown-up daughter who's very beautiful as well? And why is he with such a good-looking woman who's a very famous actress that
Obviously.
he's madly in love with? So, if he was gay, I believe Daniel's strong enough of character that he would just be with a man. I don't think he'd be frightened to tell people, look, I'm gay and I want to be with a man. But I don't think he does. I think maybe he's experimented. I'm not judging him. Maybe he has experimented. I don't know. I don't want to comment. I would say I've got nothing against people being gay. If that's what makes them happy, good luck. I think life's so bloody short. What difference? But I want to put forward that gay people do not have an easy ride. And it's a bit like when I was a child, I had a dream that I was black. And the lesson in the dream was how black people at that time had been oppressed. And I realized how wrong the world was to judge someone for the color of their skin. I must have been 10, 12 years old when I had the dream, and I was black in the dream. I've more recently found myself in a previous life, and I'm happy on another episode to show a picture of me a couple of 100 years ago, and you can see it's my face as a black man, and I was incarnated as that person. But
Oh, you
in
did
the
find
same
out a previous reincarnation of
of
yourself
myself, yes, I'll actually,
through
I can actually,
archives and pictures.
no, I found the picture and the archive. I may be able to show it to you even now if it comes clear on camera. It's quite shocking because it's me as a black man, and it's not something fake. I dreamt it, researched it, and found it. But what I was going to say was the reason I picked up on that was because also, in the same way that being a black person, you've been judged and abused in this life. A lot of them have been mistreated, ill treated, and people have twisted the Bible to use it as a way to hurt people. Can you hear me?
One question for you,
Yeah. My
Maurice.
earpieces are running out.
You you
Sorry.
you you um you are providing services which are about leading people to some previous incarnations,
I can do regression. Yes,
past life
I can do past life
incarnations,
regression. Mostly, what I do for
past life
people is
regression. But my
yes.
question is the following: what is the spiritual interest and benefits to reconnect with some past
Well,
life?
sometimes by connecting with a past life, you can figure out some of the lessons you're experiencing in this one. But what I would say is that what I like to do
Would you
mainly in
say by connecting your with your past life, you can understand yourself and the mechanism of your psyche slightly
well, no, you
better?
can understand the lessons sometimes that you're going through in this life. This is actually the picture I wanted to show. I hope you can see that. I don't know if you can see it
So
clearly, but it's
it was
basically
you.
yes. And if I show you a younger picture of myself in this life, is that clear to you? Can you see it?
Very clear.
Right now, I'm going to show you what I looked like when I was young. Because obviously now, I'm in my 60s, so I'm a lot older. But when I was young, I was the white version of that, and I'm going to find a picture and show you right now. Because, it's fascinating. It's definitely me. I didn't even know until I dreamt this and then found it that, in fact, we could reincarnate looking the same. There are a lot of theories online that you would be able to find of famous actors and famous people. And they find pictures of them from 300 years ago where they look exactly the same, but of course they were different
Do you
color,
mean
different religion.
that it was because they were incarnated in those bodies? That's the reason.
Yes, but I think that sometimes the facial features return because genetics don't bring everything. The spirit is stronger than any genetics. So I'm going to try and find the picture where I'm just looking for it now, where I would resemble him. In this picture, I will be a white person and I will be younger, but I will look similar to the way that the black fellow does. I'm just looking for it because I've got all these pictures in my phone. But it's quite fascinating the way that I looked very similar. Of course, when one wants a picture, they can never bloody well find it. But I will, given an okay, here you go. I don't know if you could see, but the resemblance of the black fellow, he's got all the same features that I had. Do you see it now?
I see it clearly, but
Yeah. And the thing is,
I
these
couldn't
days, I
affirm how much it's
yeah.
compelling.
Well, when you look at both together, you would see that we have the same nose, same eyes, same head shape. Whereas now, of course, my nose has been broken so many times, it's spread. I don't even see it's broken. But originally, I had the identical nose, and I really did look like that's the white version of the black
Maybe
fellow.
some
Do you get it?
correspondence.
Yeah. I mean, the point is that it's quite fascinating how things unfold. It really is. But anyway, to finish off, yes, I believe in Jesus. Yes, I believe in reincarnation. I'm not very convinced about organized religion, but bless everyone and good
Oh,
luck
of
to them,
course,
whatever
the
they
past
believe.
life
I,
regression would be the
yes,
object of an entire podcast because there's
yes.
so
With,
much
with
to say.
past life regression, what I would do there is one can use it to help the person center. Because remember, what I like to do when I read someone is the past, the present, and the future potentials. And then I predict for them what will unfold for them should they choose a certain course of action, should they react to the information. So, for example, let's say someone's going into a marriage time frame. I'm able to say to them, right, you've got a marriage chance in front of you. Don't dilly dally, it's there for you. Or I might say, I'm sorry, but it looks like you're going to get divorced, and I don't think there's much you can do about it. Or I might turn around and say, look, go for it because this is your time to get cast as the new James Bond. Do you get it? It depends. I can't tell you what message is going to be for any individual, but I have been extremely accurate over the last 45 years professionally and even more than
You
55
know, of
years
course, that
unprofessionally.
in my case, Maurice, I'm so interested by past life regression in the way that I'm so curious about this
Well, what we'll
primal
do
civilization.
on another time, just privately, I'll do a regression for you, and we'll see what comes in your mind and what you're
Oh,
shown. Because I've done it. I don't do it all the
I'm
time.
pretty
What I
convinced that I wasn't a very interesting person in my
Well,
previous
I was going to
incarnation.
say one of the things that I can't stand is when all these mediums come on and say, "Oh, in your last life you were King Henry VIII, or in your last life, you were a sex symbol or a billionaire." It's simply not true. Now, occasionally it would be true.
I'm personally more interested about what I'm going to do next week because I pretty have no ideas. Still, it has been a privilege.
You will definitely have some very good things start happening to you, not very far off. It's just that you're being tested, as we all are. Life Trump inaugurated will be a hell of a lot better than before he was. Okay, the whole world will calm down, and finances and emotions will balance. I believe on Trump's inauguration, we will see a stoppage of the Middle Eastern wars. We will see a stoppage of the Ukrainian war. We will see friendship with the North Koreans, and we will see Putin and Trump in a deep friendship and mutual respect, out of which a great relationship will be formed. And
Hopefully.
they're both businessmen. Never, no, definitely. You've also got the Libra Gemini connection there, and they really do respect each other. So I'm very positive about that. Okay, I know what's going to happen there. I did, in fact, predict the ceasefire in Lebanon, and I have
The
written
big
proof from
question
my
would be
clients.
what gonna happen after this Donald Trump's mandate.
Everything good. Well, Clint Eastwood, we've done everything we can. I'm a bit worried about his health next year,
Yeah, you
and I
told
have a
me.
great
But
fear that he
is
may
it because he's
pass.
a Gemini, or we
No, no,
because
no.
we're
It's his
gonna enter
personal.
the year
No, no,
of a
no, no,
snake?
no. Because it's the snake. It's just that I'm concerned that he will have. I think he's already not in a great space this Christmas, and I just worry because he's had so much heartache and pain whether he will continue. I'm hoping he lives on for another 20 years, but I'm worried about him. It's not the best year he'll ever have. 2025 for Clint is not the best year. I wish it was. I shall pray for him.
Maurice is
God
old
bless him.
and now he's a living legend. He
It's
has
not his
done.
age, it's his numerology, the space in time he's occupied. If he'd have had this numerology when he was, say, 70, he definitely wouldn't have a risk of death. But when you're 95 and you have this numerology, it's dangerous because his body's tired. Everybody is born to die. Even Moses died, Abraham died, everybody died. The only one who won't die is God because he's eternal. Do you see? Jesus also can't die. But
Hopefully, our soul is immortal.
I believe that uh, we are like each human being is a cell in the body of God. That's what I believe. You know the way the human body is made of billions of cells, and we're made in the image of God. Well, I believe that we are cells in the body of God, each and every one of us. And eventually, when we've evolved enough, we can go to heaven and be with Him. But remember, that takes a number of lifetimes. As humans, we've got a lot to learn. That's why there's so many astrological signs. You see,
In order
you
to
have to come through
experience
in all of them.
manifestation from a different angle.
Mm. It's not just manifestation. In order to evolve sufficiently, because manifestation talks about the physical realm, but spiritual manifestation of becoming good enough, evolved enough, perfect enough to be near or close to the power that is God, the internal good, the all-seeing, all-being incredibleness that is God himself, one would have to evolve an awful lot to actually get close to him. I'm not sure you can do that in less than hundreds of lifetimes or even thousands.
And
You
yet, the
understand?
spiritual maturation could be accelerated, isn't it?
It depends. I think that Pisces are the last life, so they can go back to God. But I think that Aries, being the first life, have got a lot to learn. I'm Leo, so I'm sort of the fifth life. You're Sagittarius, so you would be a little further on than me because you've got Capricorn and Aquarius after you, so you're actually the 10th life. But we can go into a show about this.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Sagittarius has
sadly, my
a great spiritual potential, and
oh, they
yet
do, they
they
do.
are a pain in the ass. I thought the Capricorn was
I,
the
I
most
I
elevated.
actually love Sagittarians,
But that's
and
because
I
you're a Leo,
yes,
Maurice.
but I love all signs, but Capricorn are the most selfish of the zodiac, without question. Gemini is the liar of the zodiac. Leos have got big heads. Virgos are difficult with low self-esteem. Aquarians think too much. Cancerians hurt themselves. I mean, the water signs are emotional. The fire signs are doers. The earth signs can be very stubborn, but they also get a lot done, and they're usually very good looking. What have we done? Fire is Aries, Leo, and Sag. Earth is Capricorn, Taurus, Virgo. Cancer is Cancer, Pisces, and Scorpio, water. But we can do shows about this. I've got endless knowledge to do with
With great
astrology and
pleasure,
numerology.
Maurice.
All right. Well, look, well, I really enjoyed it. I hope you can edit a little bit because
Pleasure is
might be done.
more than shared. Um,
And let's take this opportunity for everyone who watches it to pray that Clint has a wonderful year and that he doesn't suffer and that he doesn't have a downfall physically of any kind.
oh,
We
thank you.
can make that prayer, you see. We can do that because group prayer is more powerful than singular prayer. Do you see?
Let's
So God bless
let's
him.
do a collective prayer for
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood.
Shall we pray right now for Clint?
Oh, with great pleasure. Let's go.
We don't have to say anything. We just wish him well. In the name of Jesus, we bless Clint and hope that he survives and that everything goes well for him and his family. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. All right. Look after yourself and thank you very much indeed for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for this intervention, Maurice. I'm impatient to see the next episode to be continued. We may speak if you want to be our guest.
All right, sir. Look after yourself. God bless you and all our viewers.
Thank you
And
very much.
seasonal greetings. Pardon me. Seasonal greetings to everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.